Tonight, follow us into the unknown, where the sands hide secrets and every shadow tells a tale. Welcome to AncientWiz, where the past is alive. For more than 2,000 years, a network of roads woven like a tapestry of ambition connected the empires of the East and West. These roads were not built from stone, but from stories, from dreams, from courage, and from fear. This is the tale of the Silk Road, how it was born from desperation, how it flourished in splendor, how it survived war, plague, and betrayal, and how in the end it vanished, leaving only echoes behind. But before silk and spices, before caravans and coin, there was a question. What lies beyond the horizon? Centuries before the first camel caravan set out, ancient peoples moved restlessly across the vastness of Eurasia. Their motives were as old as time itself: hunger, hope, and the yearning for what they could not have. Far to the east, in the Yellow River Basin, the Shang dynasty cast its first bronze. Between them, mountains rose like walls, deserts burned in the sun, and nomads wandered the steppe. It was not silk they sought, but speed, an unbroken path from Susa to Sardis, nearly 2,500 kilometers long. Messengers on horseback could cross it in a week, and every few miles stood a post house where fresh horses waited. In the valleys of the Tigris and Euphrates, the Sumerians grew barley and built the first cities. In the Warring States period, 7 great kingdoms fought for supremacy. In the end, it was Qin Shi Huang who conquered them all, declaring himself the first emperor of China. Obsidian from Anatolia, lapis lazuli from Bodakshan, jade from Khotan, amber from the Baltikal, found their way into the hands of those who could afford curiosity. Along its length, Greeks traded oil and wine for Persian carpets and gold, while Egyptian grain fed Babylonian feasts. In 138 BCE, he chose Chang'an, a low-ranking official but a man of courage, to find the Usa, a tribe driven west by the Zhang, new hoping they might help turn the tide. They would be the first to look outward, to see the value of what lay beyond the mountains. Traders became storytellers, and stories became maps. Trade was a risk, but also a promise. But these were not yet roads. They were whispers, rumors of distant lands where the moon rose differently, where the gods wore other faces. Captured by the Zhang almost immediately, he spent years as a prisoner, escaping only to find the Uaz had moved even farther west, settling by the Oxus River. He returned to China after 13 years, a living ghost bearing news not of allies, but of a world far larger than anyone in Chang'an had ever imagined. In the 5th century BCE, the Persian Empire forged the world's first great highway. The Royal Road became a vein of empire, carrying news, armies, merchants, and spies. But the Royal Road stopped at the frontiers. Beyond, the world was rumor and shadow. Camels and horses bore loads of silk, porcelain, jade, and lacquerware westward, and returned with gold, ivory, glass, and grapes. There were lands where precious horses grazed on emerald pastures, where strange spices and gemstones could be found, where merchants dealt in wonders beyond the reach of China. At the far edge of the world, the Zhou dynasty gave way to chaos. It was light, strong, beautiful, and a secret known only to the Chinese. Now, it would become the lifeblood of an empire. He built the first version of the Great Wall, buried thousands alive to guard his tomb, and dreamed of unifying the world. But even as the Qin dynasty crumbled, a new power rose: the Han. The Han court was troubled by a deadly enemy, the Xiongnu, fierce nomads of the northern steppe who raided the borders, burned villages, and vanished into the grasslands. Emperor Wu of Han decided to seek an alliance to the west. Zhang Qian's journey was a tale of endurance and loss. He pleaded for an alliance, but the Uaz had no interest in war. They were content, prosperous, distant. Still, Zhang Qian observed their customs, saw their horses, their markets, and their goods from India, Persia, and beyond. Zhang Qian's tales of Western kingdoms ignited the Han court's imagination. Silk had already become a currency of diplomacy, a gift for the powerful, a treasure for the ambitious. Emissaries and merchants began to trace Zhang Qian's path, not as conquerors, but as traders. The Silk Road was not a single route, but a web, a network that split and rejoined. Bending around rivers and deserts, threading through oases like beads. In the centuries that followed, caravans became a common sight on the western horizon. Each caravan was a world in itself, small city moving across the sands. Caravaneers hired guards to fend off bandits. Caravanserais fortified inns rose at intervals along the route, offering safety, rest, and a chance to trade news. In these places, languages mingled. Chinese, Persian, Sogdian, Greek, Arabic, Sanskrit. So did ideas, religions, and diseases. By the 1st century CE, word of Chinese silk had reached Rome. It was soft as cloud, light as a sigh, and impossible to produce in the West. The Roman elite, especially women, became obsessed. Silk garments became a scandal in the Senate, accused of causing moral decay, bankrupting men, and weakening the empire. Pliny the Elder complained, "At the price of our women's modesty, we pay out our gold for foreign vanity." Still, demand only grew. But Rome and China would never meet face to face. Between them, a relay of middlemen, Parthians, Sogdians, Bactrians, and countless others. In the oases and markets of Central Asia, fortunes rose and fell on a single bolt of cloth. The deserts of Central Asia, Aklimakan and Gobi, were graveyards for the unprepared. Travelers whispered that those who entered without luck or a guide would never return. But the oases, Dunhuang, Khotan, Kashgar, Samarkand were islands of life. Here, travelers drank, traded, prayed, and rested. Here, Buddhist monks painted the walls of caves. Merchants built temples to every god they could name, and poets composed verses in forgotten tongues. In Dunhuang's Mogao caves, hidden for 1,000 years, monks preserved thousands of scroll scriptures, contracts, even music that still speak to us today. The Silk Road was a highway of faith. Buddhism moved from India to China, carried by wandering monks and merchants. Christianity and Manichaeism crept eastward, competing for souls. Zoroastrianism, with its fire temples, became the faith of many traders. Islam would come later, spreading with the Arab conquests and changing the face of Central Asia. Every caravan carried not only goods, but gods. Paper, gunpowder, the compass, these, too, traveled the Silk Road, changing the world far from their birthplace. So did music, poetry, styles of dress, and food. Apricots, peaches, and grapes traveled from China to Rome. Glass and silver from the West dazzled the East. Doctors exchanged cures and curses. Alchemists dreamed of immortality, and philosophers argued the nature of the soul. The Silk Road was a classroom, a marketplace, a battlefield, and a stage. Empires rose and fell along the Silk Road. The Han dynasty flourished, fell, and rose again as the Temps, a golden age when Chang'an was the greatest city on earth. Samarkand, Bukhara, and Merv became legend cities of blue tiles and golden domes, crossroads for every race and religion. But darkness always followed. Bandits grew bold. Armies marched. In the chaos, the roads sometimes vanished, swallowed by sand, closed by war, or broken by plague. But always, the desire for connection remained. As the centuries turned, the Silk Road wove itself deeper into the fabric of the world. In the east, the Han dynasty fell and chaos reigned. But from the ruins, the Tang dynasty would rise, a force of prosperity, culture, and ambition. To the west, the old power of Rome fractured into the Byzantine Empire, holding its ground against time and invasion. But the true masters of the Silk Road were often neither emperor nor general. They were the Sogdienza people of traders, interpreters, and diplomats, born in the oases of Samarkand and Bukhara. At its peak, the Tang capital of Chang'an was the largest, most cosmopolitan city on earth. Here, Persian and Indian merchants walked beside Turkish soldiers and Buddhist monks from distant lands. In the market, one could buy silver from Persia, glass from Syria, lapis from Afghanistan, and furs from the far north. Poets wandered the city's alleys, composing verses about moonlit pavilions and the sorrow of exile. The imperial court reveled in foreign music, exotic dances, and banquets that lasted until dawn. Emissaries from as far as Japan, Korea, Tibet, and Arabia paid tribute, awed by the city's grandeur. Yet beneath the splendor, tensions simmered. Corruption festered. Old prejudices remained. It was the Sogdians who truly knit East and West together. Neither an empire nor a faith, the Sogdians were a network, a living web of families and merchants who spoke many tongues and worshipped many gods. Their cities, Samarkand, Bukhara, Penjakan, became jewels of the desert, crossroads for traders and travelers. A Sogdian merchant's journey was an odyssey. He might start in Chang'an with silk and lacquer, pass through Turfan and Dunhuang, survive the perils of the Taklamakan bargain in Samarkand, and finally reach the bazaars of Byzantium with his fortunes, if fortune itself favored him. Alagdians traded not just goods but knowledge. Ladians carried stories, maps, rumors of wars and wonders. They became the glue that bound the world together, and for centuries. Their language was the lingua franca of the Silk Road. Beneath the movement of gold and silk, the Silk Road carried ideas more precious still. Buddhism flowed east, carried by monks on foot and merchants on camelback. Indian scriptures were translated in the cave temples of Dunhuang and Chang'an, while Buddhist art blossomed from Bamayan to Japan. Nestorian Christianity crept east with the merchants. And Manichaeism, born in Persia, spread its dualistic gospel across Central Asia, shining for a moment in the courts of China. Zoroastrian fire temples lit up the night in oasis towns, while old animist beliefs lingered in the mountains. Later, as the wains of history shifted, new faith would sweep the sands. Islam. In the 7th century, a storm rose in the Arabian Peninsula. Within decades, the armies of Islam had swept across Persia, crushing the Sassanid Empire and confronting Byzantium at its gates. Arab generals, their banners bright with verses of the Quran, conquered city after city: Ctesiphon, Damascus, Jerusalem, and eventually Samarkand and beyond. Towns burned, dynasties fell. But the energy of the new faith soon turned eastward, seeking trade and knowledge. Muslim merchants reached China's ports. Chinese envoys traveled to Baghdad. In the New World, Islamic scholars collected the wisdom of Greece, Persia, India, and China, blending them in the libraries of Baghdad, Bukhara, and Cordoba. The Silk Road survived because it adapted. In the shadows of conquest, it changed, never dying, always shifting. But for every story of splendor, there was one of terror. The Silk Road was a path of peril. Sandstorms that could swallow a caravan in minutes. Marauding bandits who struck from the darkness. Cities that vanished beneath the sands, leaving only bones and pottery behind. Every traveler knew the legends of the Lopnor Lake, whose shifting waters stranded armies, of the Black Gobi, where mirages tempted the thirsty to their doom, of the caves of 1,000 Buddhas, where the air was thick with prayer and secrets, yet still they came, for profit, for pilgrimage, for escape. The Silk Road was a gamble, a test of fate, and the world's greatest stage. No golden age lasts forever. By the 9th century, the Tang dynasty faltered, and rebellion shook the empire, bandits ruled the roads, and the lights of Chang'an grew dim. The An Lushan Rebellion, a cataclysm of betrayal and war, shattered the peace. Millions died. Caravans dwindled. Even the Sogdians, who had survived so much, suffered, their cities sacked, their people scattered. To the west, Byzantium fought for survival against new enemies, and the old empires of Persia and Rome were little more than memories. But the road itself endured. Broken, battered, sometimes forgotten, but always there. Waiting for the next dreamer, the next conqueror, the next great journey. As the centuries turned, new powers rose in Central Asia and the Middle East. Turkic tribes migrated across the steppe, their horsemen fierce and unpredictable. The Seljuk Turks swept into Persia and Anatolia, forging new empires on the ruins of the old. Islamic law and learning spread, carried by scholars, judges, and mystics. Sufi saints established lodges along the road, offering shelter and spiritual guidance to travelers. Markets revived. Baghdad became the center of a new world, a place where poets debated philosophers, and merchants counted their coins beneath the golden dome of the Abbasid caliphs. In China, the Song dynasty emerged, less powerful than the Tang, but brilliant in art, technology, and commerce. Silk, porcelain, and tea flowed out of the east, and silver, horses, and glass returned. The Silk Road was battered but not broken. Its heart still beat beneath the dust. By the 12th century, the Silk Road was as busy as ever, though the names had changed. In the west, Italian city-states, Genoa, Pisa sent their agents deep into Asia, searching for bargains and advantage. In the east, Mongol tribes watched and waited, their eyes fixed on the riches that crossed the steppes. In the shadows, new dangers lurked, rivalries flared. Every traveler knew. On the Silk Road, fortune and ruin rode side by side, but no one, neither king, nor merchant, nor monk, could foresee what was coming next. No warning echoed across the steppe. The world shifted beneath 1,000 hoofbeats, and the Silk Road trembled at the coming of the Mongols. In the early 13th century, a leader rose from the grassland, Temujin, the outcast, who would become Genghis Khan. The world's most feared conqueror, he united the fractious Mongol tribes through blood and vision, demanding loyalty and discipline with a promise. Under him, the world could be remade. From their homeland, the Mongols exploded outward like a wildfire, their banners whipping in the wind, their armies unstoppable. Cities that resisted were razed, populations slaughtered or scattered to the winds. Samarkand, Bukhara, myrrh-fabled cities of the Silk Road burned in days. Caravans vanished, merchants fled or paid tribute, and the great arteries of trade were choked by fear. And yet, from the ashes, a new world emerged. Genghis Khan's heirs forged the largest land empire ever known. From the shores of the Yellow Sea to the banks of the Danube, from the jungles of Southeast Asia to the icy north. A single authority ruled, the Great Khan. For the first time in centuries, bandits and warlords feared a greater power. With Mongol garrisons guarding the roads, a strange peace descended the Pax Mongolica. Now, a merchant could travel from Venice to Beijing with a single passport, stamped by the Khan. Caravans grew again, larger and richer, bearing not only silk, but gems, spices, medicines, and knowledge. Within a single lifetime, the world seemed smaller. China's inventions, gunpowder, paper, the compass traveled west. Europe's gold, art, and silver flowed east. In Samarkand and Karakoram, Persian doctors treated Chinese nobles. Italian artisans learned the secrets of silk. The Mongols, fierce in war, became patrons of trade. They encouraged artisans, protected scholars, and created a postal system that spanned continents. Yet the peace was fragile, haunted by memories of slaughter and the caprice of distant khans. In the year 1271, a young Venetian set out with his father and uncle. Following the whispers of fortune and curiosity, his name was Marco Polo. He crossed the mountains of Persia, survived the burning deserts, marveled at the cities of Central Asia. He arrived at the court of Kublai Khan, Genghis's grandson, in the capital of the Yuan dynasty, a city called Khanbalik, later Beijing. Polo claimed to have served the Great Khan, to have witnessed the marvels of the East paper money, glittering palaces, vast markets, feasts beyond imagination. He wrote of black stones that burned like fire, of porcelain, of cities that dwarfed anything in Europe. For years he traveled the length and breadth of China and beyond, returning to Venice with memories and stories, his head filled with wonders. Skeptics called him the man who lies for a living, but his book, The Travels of Marco Polo, became a sensation, fueling dreams of adventure and greed across Europe. The Silk Road under the Mongols was as open and as dangerous as it would ever be. During the Mongol Age, more than just goods crossed the world's heartlands. Scholars from Baghdad traveled to China, bringing astronomy, mathematics, and medicine. Persian craftsmen built observatories for the Khan. Nestorian Christian monks debated Buddhist and Taoist sages in distant cities. The exchange of ideas, stories, recipes, and techniques blossomed, woven into the very fabric of Eurasian life. Yet beneath the surface, old wounds festered. The Mongols played with power, setting up puppet khans, demanding tribute, and crushing any sign of rebellion. Empires rose and fell in a single generation, and then, as suddenly as it had come, the storm began to break. The peace of the Mongols was doomed by an enemy no sword could kill. From the grasslands of the Crimea, plague-carrying fleas found new hosts. Some say it began when Mongol armies besieged the city of Kaffa, hurling plague-ridden corpses over the walls. Others whispered that the disease was older still, lurking in the heart of Central Asia. Whatever the truth, in the mid-14th century, death rode the Silk Road. Caravans brought not only silk and spice, but the invisible killer. Merchants fell sick in the oases. The sickness spread like wildfire west to the Black Sea, across the Mediterranean and into Europe. The world reeled. Tens of millions perished. Cities emptied. Markets shrank to nothing. No one trusted strangers. Trade collapsed under the weight of fear. For the first time in centuries, the Silk Road grew silent. The plague hastened the unraveling of the Mongol world. The great empires splintered into rival khanates, each grasping for power. Banditry returned, the roads became perilous, and the once mighty cities of Central Asia faded into memory. To the west, Europe rebuilt, but its eyes were turning to the sea. In the east, the Ming dynasty would soon close China's doors, suspicious of foreigners and their ways. The Silk Road, once a highway of dreams, became a memory, a ghost path haunted by ruins and stories. But even as it faded, the Silk Road had already changed the world forever. As the Silk Road withered under plague and war, a new dream flickered to life on the western horizon, a dream born not on the land, but on restless waves. In Portugal and Spain, visionaries gazed past the known edges of the map. Merchants whispered of fortunes to be made. If only one could reach Asia by water, escaping the dangers, taxes, and armies that choked the ancient roads. One by one, ships left Lisbon and Seville, braving storms, unknown shores, and death for the promise of spice and silk. In 1498, Vasco da Gama rounded the Cape of Good Hope and landed on the Indian coast. For the first time, Europe had a direct line to Ashabai, passing the middlemen of the Silk Road. Soon, Portuguese, Spanish, Dutch, and English ships plied the Indian Ocean, their holds packed with pepper, porcelain, and silver. Colonial outposts sprang up from Goa to Macau, new crossroads of greed and violence. The Silk Road never, a single path shifted again, its lifeblood seeping from sand to sea. Meanwhile, to the north, the Ottoman Empire rose in fire and thunder. In 1453, Constantinople, last echo of Ramphel to Sultan Mehmed the Conqueror, its streets echoing with cannon and prayer. The Ottomans became gatekeepers between Europe and Asia, their taxes and tolls strangling what was left of the old routes. Caravans dwindled, cities that had once thrived on trade withered, yet the Ottomans, too, understood the value of the Silk Road. Caravanserais and bazaars were built anew. Merchants paid homage in gold and goods. But the world had changed, and the overland trade would never regain its former glory. The Ming dynasty in China, shaken by the memory of the Mongols, turned inward. Foreign trade was restricted, embassies were called, and the last great caravans rolled through empty gates. Cities like Samarkand, Bukhara, and Kashgar faded. Winds swept through ruined markets where once the world had gathered. The Silk Road was not dead, but dreaming. In hidden valleys and forgotten oases, small caravans still crept along, bearing salt, carpets, or stories. But the age of global exchange of emperors and monks, poets and pirates had ended. Yet even as the world shifted, the Silk Road had already done its work. Foods, flowers, and ideas once foreign became native. Apricots and grapes thrived in the valleys of China. While the recipes of Persia and India flavored the kitchens of Rome, Buddhism shaped the faith of East Asia. Islam spread far beyond Arabia. Mathematics, astronomy, and medicine leapt borders, transforming civilizations. No wall, no sea could erase the mingling of blood, language, and legend born of the road. Centuries later, the Silk Road lingers in memory and stone. Its cities, some still inhabited, others half buried, call to the curious. Explorers and archaeologists chase the ghosts of lost empires. Monks' scrolls, buried for 1,000 years, are unearthed from desert caves, their stories as fresh as the day they were hidden. And in the modern world, a new Silk Road is rising, not of camels, but of rails and roads, data and dreams. China's Belt and Road Initiative seeks to stitch the continents together once more, promising connection and prosperity, even as old rivalries and suspicions linger. The Silk Road was never a single line drawn on a map. It was a living thing shaped by mountains and storms, by ambition and disaster, by human longing for what lay beyond. Empires rose and fell. Fortunes were made and lost. But the true treasure of the Silk Road was always the same. the meeting of strangers, the exchange of ideas, the belief that the world was vast, but not beyond knowing. Tonight, as we step away from the sand in silence, remember, the Silk Road is not gone. It waits just beyond the next horizon. The old roads have faded into sand, but their echoes still shape the world. Across the broad heart of Eurasia, the ghosts of the Silk Road are awakening. From Istanbul to Xi'an, rails now snake where camels once trod. Container ships ride the waves to ports in Karachi, Bandar Abbas, and Shanghai, following in steel and diesel, the dreams of ancient merchants. But this new Silk Road is a world of paradox. It promises connection, wealth, and peace, yet revives old rivalries and anxieties. Countries compete for influence. Nations remember old betrayals. In the early 21st century, China launched the Belt and Road Initiative, trillion-dollar vision to bind Asia, Africa, and Europe, with new roads, railways, pipelines, and ports. Supporters call it the dawn of a new golden age, a way to lift millions out of poverty, to build cities and foster understanding across continents. Skeptics warn of debt, dependence, and the risk that history will repeat itself. That power will concentrate in the hands of a few. That trade will once again be shaped by the whims of distant empires. On dusty roads in Kazakhstan, truckers carry smartphones instead of scrolls. Tashkent and Samarkand, neon lights flash above the ruins of blue-tiled mosques. The Silk Road lives transformed, but eternal. The story is not only one of progress, but of rediscovery. In the 19th and 20th centuries, explorers like Sven Hedden and Arl Stein braved the Taklamakan's deadly storms to unearth the buried cities of the Silk Road. They found painted caves and ruined stupas, Buddhist manuscripts and forgotten languages, testimonies to the world that once thrived in the shadow of the desert. The caves of Dunhuang yielded a treasure trove, tens of thousands of scrolls, letters, contracts, and prayers, many sealed since the Tang dynasty. Here, the voices of pilgrims and princesses, monks and merchants, whisper across the ages. Today, archaeologists and historians use satellites and drones to trace lost riverbeds, map ruined walls beneath the dunes. The sands may cover the bones of the past, but they cannot erase the truth of what once was. For every empire that rose or fell, millions of ordinary people lived and died in the shadow of the Silk Road. Imagine a caravan leader, steering his camels by starlight, haunted by bandits and the memory of home. A Sogdian merchant, teaching his daughter to count in 4 languages before she can write her own name. A Buddhist monk, risking the journey west for a chance to find a single precious scroll. A Roman matron wrapping herself in silk that crossed 10,000 miles and a dozen borders. These stories are lost to history, yet their echoes remain in our customs, our languages, our food, and our beliefs. The Silk Road was not only a path for kings and generals, but for dreamers, exiles, artists, and thieves. The greatest legacy of the Silk Road is not gold or glory, but the meeting of minds and hearts. Here, Buddhism, Islam, Christianity, Zoroastrianism, and many other faiths met, sometimes in violence, often in dialogue. Greek philosophy mingled with Indian mathematics and Chinese medicine. Persian poetry was translated in Chang'an. Arabic science was preserved in Samarkand. Even the words we use, sugar, orange, caravan, bazaar, the legacy of the journeys that shaped the world. It was along the Silk Road that humanity learned, painfully and imperfectly, that difference can be a source of strength, that curiosity is as valuable as courage, that every road is also a crossroads. The world is more connected now than ever before. We can cross oceans in hours, speak across continents in seconds, carry more knowledge in our phones than the greatest libraries of old. Yet the lessons of the Silk Road endure. Trade brings wealth, but also risk. Connection breeds innovation, but also competition. Empires rise and fall, but people, ordinary, extraordinary people, keep dreaming of what lies beyond the horizon. As old rivalries return and new technologies reshape our world, the Silk Road reminds us that nothing is permanent, that every ending is also a beginning. The Silk Road was not a single path, but a living web of tapestry woven from countless hopes, fears, betrayals, and discoveries. From the bronze dawn of empires to the neon nights of the present, its story is our story, restless, ambitious, resilient, and always searching. So tonight, as you listen to these echoes, remember, we are all travelers on some forgotten road. The past is not lost. It waits for us just beyond the horizon. Welcome to AncientWiz, where the past is alive.